On Saturday evening, though, the Galway focus certainly on the game against Dublin at Pearse Stadium.
Yeah, Cian, sure. Look, it's great that both round robins have gone to the last day. Like even in Leinster, like the Westmeath Laois game is a massive game. See who stays up in the Lee McCarthy and who goes to the Joe McDonagh. So massive amount to play for. Obviously from a Galway perspective, they're in a great position. Still need a result to be sure of a Leinster final appearance. So yeah, like it's great, and I suppose look at the modern history of the Dublin Galway relationship is adds a bit more spice to it in that they lost to Galway lost to Dublin last year, in a game that was considered a shock, a result that was considered a shock. Dublin put Galway out of the championship in 2019, and it was in Parnell Park that night. Drama was incredible, the suspense. I'd say probably never. I suppose everything that the GAA had probably hoped to create with their own robin, because that 2 or 3 minutes after the game, it was just pure chaos, where people were listening to the Wexford Kilkenny game, and I think in the lead up to the game, I think the odds on those results happening were something like 23-24 to 1. Like even if Dublin beat Galway, there had to be a draw in Wexford Park. And remember even listening to the last few minutes where Lee Chin hit the post at one stage. TJ might have got a free, then Chin got the equaliser, and you just couldn't have made it up. But like Dublin that night, they were full value for their win. I suppose for Galway, they were probably they had injuries. Joe Canning, that was his first game in the competition that year. Came on with about maybe 20 minutes to go, got a point. You could argue that Galway wouldn't have been in that position if Joe hadn't got injured in the league semi-final against Waterford earlier in the year. So yeah, like Dublin they've good recent track record. I was in Tullamore for a replay in 2015, and Galway gave them a good trim on that day. But yeah, like they've never really had any hang-ups with Galway. And Dublin, I suppose, look at Dublin under fairly serious pressure now. Not so much after losing the last day, but just the manner of the way they collapsed. It was a terrible performance. And it probably just, goes to reaffirm, Cian, that they do have a psychological hang-up with Kilkenny. You could even see that in the league earlier in the year, back in March, when Dublin went into that game in good shape. They just beaten Tip. They'd drawn with Waterford. I'd say if they won that game, they definitely looking at a semi-final. And Kilkenny just bullied them off the pitch. Just better team. Just Dublin didn't play well at all. And you could see strains of that again the other night. So like they're coming in, I suppose, from a Dublin perspective, they're coming in on the back of that performance, which isn't good. But they know now that that's not going to be anywhere near the level required to even beat Galway. And you think with the game being on at Pearse Stadium, like the last two Dublin wins were in Parnell Park and Croke Park. So you'd imagine Galway having home advantage will be fairly significant.
You look back maybe, Christy, over the past decade, just the 2013 Leinster Final springs to mind, when Dublin under Anthony Daly, a great friend of yours, beat Galway convincingly in a Leinster Final. And in the intervening years, they've had some good results against Galway, and that, as you said, maybe the psychological hang-up that might exist with Kilkenny doesn't seem to exist for Dublin with Galway.
No, we've spoken about this already before, Cian, that I suppose that flare-up in the Super 11s there back in, was it 2015? There was fairly significant dust-up out in Boston, so I think there was a lot of bad blood after that. And maybe that's carried on a little bit. Now looking, obviously, a lot of the players that were there that day are not there, but there still is a good few of them. So, and like maybe it comes back as well. We kind of mentioned this last week in relation to Laois, like that. I suppose historically, like Galway wouldn't have met a lot of these counties, because they weren't operating in Leinster. Galway in Leinster since 2009. So like if you were to go back over, look at all the times they've met, like the first year they were in Leinster, for example, they played Kilkenny the first game. The following year they played Offaly was in a quarter-final or semi-final. They played Dublin then in Tullamore in 11. I was at it. Dublin beat them. Really good performance in Dublin. they beat them in 2013. So like, like they haven't played them that often. And even would say go back to when they did play them at the start, Dublin got off to a really good start. And I suppose psychologically, that does play a part in how you maybe view your opponents, because like when did Galway play Dublin in championship prior to that? I can't recall, but it wouldn't have been very often. It would have been decades ago. So so a lot of that feeds into the kind of narrative around how you kind of pitch the, I suppose, the history of that relationship. So yeah, and Dublin they've like last year in particular, like they were full value for that win. Like Galway now had a couple of early goal chances. I thought Galway were maybe a little bit too confident early on. They were, I'd always be encouraging forwards to go for goals, but there was maybe times where there were maybe two. It looked like they were almost taking Dublin a little bit for granted, that we walk the ball into net here, get this game done and dusted early. That didn't happen. I think that even Joe that day, I think he didn't convert his first 7 chances. And just, you could see that the air slowly seep out of Galway that day. Dublin got a hold. Apart from Conor Whelan, none of the Galway players really performed at the level they're capable of. So yeah, that could be in the back of Dublin's minds on Saturday. And I suppose the other thing is they have to go to Galway, which they haven't done. That I think they played them in the last game in 2018 in the round robin, but Dublin were gone early. They had lost their first 2 games to Kilkenny and Wexford, and they were gone out of the championship. But they went down. Galway had nothing to play for really. They used a lot of peripheral players that day, but Dublin still, Galway were Ireland champions. Dublin went down, almost beat them. So all of this stuff. Like you look at it, go back since the round robin started. What's been between the teams? Been nothing between them, and whatever has been there, Dublin have edged it. So that's and then there's obviously the Matty Kenny factor. So Matty knows most of these players better than any other manager. And even on Chris Crummy saying before after the 2019 game, Greg Kennedy was involved that time, and he said that you could really see that they really Matty and Greg, they dialed it up so much, like they were so desperate to kind of do well in that game, maybe prove their own points. And Matty'd always have that. Like Matty went for the job. He was obviously involved with Galway in 2012 when they got to All-Ireland. He was coaching the team. He went for the job 14, 15, didn't get it. He went for it again when Mihal got it at 16. So, we're all human, Cian. We all have, certain amount of ego. We have a chip on our shoulder over certain things. And I'm sure Matty's used that big time in the last 2 occasions that he's met Galway, and he'll absolutely use it again on Saturday.
For Galway, Christy, obviously the score of 237 against Laois, 14 different scorers, and they're going quite well. But how important and how relevant is it to get to a Leinster final, to go that route rather than going down maybe into round 1 of the qualifiers? Is it a vital thing? Because last week I was laughing. Some of the pieces in the paper were suggesting, it'd be great for Waterford to not to avoid a Munster final. But to me, it's just the most important thing is to remain in the championship. But for Galway's development, is a Leinster final appearance vital, or what's your take?
No, 100%, Cian. And I think not even Leinster final appearance, I think a Leinster final victory, because, are Galway going to win the All-Ireland? You couldn't say for sure that they are. They're still a bit behind Limerick in my view. So, like they were in Leinster final in 2020. Obviously we're champions in 2017, 2018. Didn't get out of their own robin in 19, beaten in final in 20, beaten in semi-final last year. So, like Galway, with the ambition and the quality they have, they should be looking at getting to Leinster final every year. So, and the other side of that as well is if it's Kilkenny in the Leinster final, which on all known form, it looks to be set up to be Galway Kilkenny Leinster final. That's going to be a massive game, Cian, with the Henry Brian Cody factor again. It's going to be probably even pumped up more now than ever after what happened the last day. So, the losers coming out of that game is going to nearly be built up to be as big as an All-Ireland in some ways. So, you're going to have a huge build-up, huge crowd, so there will be a come down for whoever loses that game. The other side of it then is, there's no guarantees Limerick will win the Munster final. Clare have a right good chance. Clare proved last week that they're entitled to almost be regarded now as the second best team in the country. So, okay, if you lose, if Limerick, let's say Limerick win the Munster final, you know, you lose the Leinster final, or if Limerick win Munster, you lose Leinster, your ticket is, if you get through the quarter final, your ticket is Limerick in the semi-final. So that's the other side of it. Now, if Clare win the Munster title, which is very possible, you know, there's all of that as well, where you could have Limerick coming through the other side. I just think it makes it less complicated for Galway to win Leinster, to get to that semi-final. There's a 4-week break between the provincial final and the Ireland semi-final, which might not be ideal, but like for a lot of the Galway guys who have a lot of mileage on the clock, might be the best route to go. To mention your point there about the 14 scores, very positive the last day. Like, you know, the goalie, 3 defenders scored, you know, like 37 points. You know, it doesn't matter who you're playing. That's serious shooting. And you know, look at it. It's kind of it's the whole thing seems to be evolving really well. Like they're, you know, from talking to a good friend of mine, the players are really playing for Henry. They're, you know, delighted with him. You know, I suppose we mentioned this before, Cian, where they were so worried that he wouldn't come back after his brother's passing, that, you know, that they really have kind of dug in. You know, they know what he's given them. They can see it every day. You know, that they really want to kind of pay back, you know, to repay what, you know, the commitment he's shown to them, and what, you know, he's put his neck on the line as well. He's gone up against his own county. You know, it's more than likely that he's going to have to face them again. So all of that, like, I think it's, you know, they seem to be really doing well. And the biggest thing is, which we mentioned here before, is that a lot of the guys that were the main players that were not playing well in the last couple of years, he's getting the most out of them. And then you look at, you know, someone like Thomas Monaghan, who again the last day, the guy whose career has been resurrected under Henry. So yeah, very, very positive. I think I'm probably still not getting enough off the bench now. Great to see Jason Flynn back the last day. He came on, got a point. Evan Nyland came on, got a point from a free. Still think they need to get a lot more off the bench than what they're getting. Like, they're not, like, if you look at the top teams, what their bench are, what they're, like, so Limerick, for example, what their bench, if they have a full strength team, you know, they'll be able to bring guys off the bench that can make a difference, that can, you know, come in and change the game. That's a level Galway still need to reach, Cian, I think, if they're going to be serious All-Ireland contenders.
And Christy, I suppose the whole championship kind of has, not that it was, we were afraid a few weeks ago that even like Munster could have been a dead duck with the way it was looking, but the results over the weekend, the whole championship is still alive for so many teams. It's great, like. Yeah,
it's brilliant, Colm. It's you know, that's the worry with the round robin, is that, you know, you could have, there's always a risk of dead rubbers. And look, you would have had that. And I suppose really from a Cork tip perspective, you know, like I was just looking at it there today, like, this is the first knockout Cork tip Munster Championship match since 1992. I was actually at that game in Porky Quay.
I was at it, Christy.
Yeah, Brian Corcoran. I was there. Brian Corcoran. He was a minor 91. You know, announced himself. Like, obviously, you know, anyone who knew anything about Corcoran at that time knew who he was. He came on and he announced himself to the hurling, the general public that day. He ended up hurler of the year. You know, brilliant player. So, like, it's a crazy Cian, 30 years. Like, they didn't meet between 92 and 2000. They met in the Munster Final in 2000, and like, there was a backdoor for the Munster, defeated Munster finalists that year. So, like, they met in qualifiers, they've met in Munster since, obviously they met in Munster finals in 05, 06. But like, this is like, you know, it's all on the line on Sunday. But like, the other side of that is, if Waterford had beaten Cork last Sunday, this would be a dead rubber on Sunday. You know, they'd be nearly fighting for see who avoids the wooden spoon. So it's brilliant. Now, obviously, Tip are going to need an awful lot to go right. They're going to have to win by 7 points and hope that Waterford lose by 8, which is very unlikely, but you never know. So a lot will depend on the team Clare, Brian Lohan picks against Waterford, because they're obviously in a Munster final. But no, it's brilliant. Like, and it's kind of really, it just goes to show you how this thing can flip in an instant, where, you know, you had Waterford, where everyone's, you know, seen as the team that were closest to Limerick. Now their fate is out of their own hands. And, you know, I think we mentioned this last week, Cian, where, you know, we were wondering, where was Waterford's form as good as everyone thought it was, right? So again, you could maybe, you know, when you look at the huge win in the league semi-final against Wexford, and in the final against Cork. Like, but you know, you look at if the form of those two teams since, you know, Wexford in particular, Cork, two terrible forms in the first two games, was too much read into that. You know, like they look like a goal. Waterford look like a goal machine in the league. That threat has receded. You know, they looked like a team on Sunday that they didn't handle the pressure at all. Now the other side of that is, you know, I just don't think Walsh Park is probably fit for championship hurling. Like I think it's 8 meters shorter than, you know, Thurles, right? So and you could see that in the first half where, you know, Cork were playing with the breeze and the amount of balls that were just like passes that were going out wide, like that kind of really summed it up. So I don't think Walsh Park suits this Waterford team. So you've all of that, but to go back to what your original question about, or original point about Waterford is, like, you know, they're completely backed into a corner now. They scored 1 point. If you get out the 2 goals against Limerick in the last 25 minutes, scored 1 point. Some of the form of their main players, with the exception of Austin Gleeson, has kind of collapsed really in the last few games. Like Tip really rattled them. So, you know, I think that maybe their status was overhyped going into the Cork game. Now, the other side of that is for Cork, they had to man up, they had to front up, they had to nearly forget about, you know, there's a lot of talk about game plans and their style and where to play certain players. I never felt that was anywhere relevant on Sunday. It was a case of, look, you've got to just hunt and scavenge and just do whatever has to be done. And, like, you know, even from a Cork perspective, like, incredible pace up front. But, you know, you've always felt like that. That's a huge asset to you from a defensive mindset as well. And, you know, they have guys like, and you saw that with Shane Kingston the last day when, you know, he hunted down Jack Prendergast, ended up and, you know, turned the ball over in the square effectively. Like when that play developed, I think Cork had 8 players in the square, and along with Pat Collins, the goalie, 9 players inside in your square. And that was something that, you know, you Cork could have been accused of in the first 2 games. Not enough guys willing to track back, not enough guys, you know, spotting defensive holes, you know, and just willing to just go back to field and walk back, because that's what all the top teams do. That's what the top teams are at now. So and like, you know, that's a mindset as much as anything else, Keane, because all these Cork lads are as fit and as strong as, you know, most of the teams out there. Limerick obviously are an exception. They're just, you know, their physicality, and I think that's the one thing that Clare have, and that Clare really let Limerick know on Sunday, is that, you know, they can't physically intimidate or bully or, you know, overpower Clare like they can't do to so many other teams, because, you know, Clare have big, strong men, like in so many occasions the last day where they wrapped Clare guys up in the tackle, you know, and so many other occasions you would have seen that ball turned over and a score, and Clare were just able to extricate themselves from those situations, survive and prosper. And like, that's, we've spoken about it numerous times, Keane, that's Limerick's world. And unless you can survive and thrive in that world, you're not going to live in it, because you can't. That's just their world, and they dominate it.
2 things about Clare, Christy. Obviously, Sunday's game against Waterford, Brian Lohan, like he probably has to have one eye on the Munster final, A. And then B, just something you touched on there regarding the physicality of Clare, where maybe when Clare won the All-Ireland and they were a really stylish, young team, crafty team, but that physicality is a key factor now. And in many ways, it kind of harkens back to the 90s in a sense, that bullish determination that counts for a lot.
Brilliant question, Cian, because I do think, like, if you look at, you could even say like Cork went back to kind of, you know, bit of old school values the last day, like, you know, putting Tim O'Mahony up front, which is a brave call. You know, he played in the defence the first 2 games. Now Tim has a track record of, you know, playing, you know, he got man of the match in an under-21 All-Ireland semi-final in 18 against Wexford, got a couple of goals that day. But, you know, I think, like, you know, I was even looking at the puck-out maps of the Waterford-Limerick game. Like, in that day, Limerick, they just everything, throw it down the pitch, get it down there. Like, even, you know, like very few, not a whole lot of sharp puck-outs over the weekend. You know, obviously there was a certain amount, which you'll always have, but it's kind of nearly a case now of, like, I would have always felt this, that the biggest mistake I think a lot of teams make on puck-outs is, you know, it's not so much what you're going to score off your own puck, or what you're going to win, like the percentage off your own puck out. It's actually the damage you can limit off the ball you lose. So, like, there's no, like, sometimes when you have too much movement on a puck out, for example, you're wide open on the counter attack when you lose it, And you nearly kind of almost have to set up like you're going to lose it. So you have to stop that counter attack of that ball, you know, the ball being, you know, ran up the pitch or being built, you know, worked through the lines or whatever. So, and that's very much like, you know, that's the Limerick mentality. Like they'll get it down there, you know, if we lose, if we don't win it, we won't let you work it back out. You have it, we'll try and turn you over. We have you turned over high up the pitch, gives us a better chance to get a score up the field. So I think, yeah, there's definitely, it's the game has nearly gone back to maybe, you know, and maybe Cork have found that out the hard way, that, you know, that the game maybe that Donald O'Grady would have, you know, been instrumental, and that was a Newtown Shannon game that, you know, that O'Grady won that at Ireland with Cork in 2004. Brilliant players, Jerry O'Connor, Ben O'Connor, guys, Colm Kenny, guys cut out to play that game. Like all those principles, right? The Newtown principles have kind of governed the modern game in so many ways. But the game's evolved so often, you know, and Limerick now have it, you know, they have married all those principles with absolute power. But, you know, it's so much harder. You can't, like maybe what Cork were doing in 2004, 2005, like you can still do that, but it's a totally different arena now. It's a totally different environment. And that maybe Cork have found out that the hard way, like that, you know, you can be too lateral, you can do too much short passing. And especially, you know, from an inside, when you have really quality inside players, you know, like the modern game now is you might have to make 4 or 5 runs to get one ball. And if you're inside making those runs and the ball isn't coming in, it's hard, you know, it's harder to kind of find that space for the players outside are trying to fill those pockets. So, you know, there's definitely, I think, you know, we make an interesting piece maybe at the end of the summer, Cian, to look back and see how we gone back to have the trends maybe being restored to, as you said, what we saw maybe 10 years ago.
It's mad the way it's changed. But if we just might take a little tax and turn, I suppose, from the Mayo point of view, we're heading to Croke Park on Saturday for our 3rd National Hurling Final in as many years. First ever Christy Ring Cup Final for Mayo against Kildare side. They're going to go in as serious underdogs against the side. Obviously, lots of Joe McDonough experience over the years, you know, playing higher levels on us. But it's a weird one, as I just mentioned before. Like in 2004, the last year before the Christy Ring and all those competitions entered, Mayo played Kildare in an All-Ireland final, which was back in the day. Kildare won, but Mayo has still have 2 guys playing from that team. Where Keith Higgins obviously is back with them the last few years full time, and Stephen Coyne were 18-year-olds, and still 18 years later are plugging away for Mayo hurling. It's mad, like.
Incredible. I was actually looking at that the other day. Colm, like, you know, that, you know, Keith was what? He was 17 when he was brought onto the panel.
Yeah. In
2002, and like 2 years later, he was nearly centre back, free taker.
You know, 2 65s, I think, and a free, and
yeah,
from playing.
Exactly. But we spoke about that before, that Matty Murphy took over that team in 2002, and I remember him telling me about this young Higgins fella that, you know, I'd never heard of him. He said this guy's a serious player, and sure he was on, you know, Connacht, you know, had him on a Railway Cup squad shortly afterwards. But yeah, it's just it's phenomenal, like, you know, and it's just, I suppose, you know, we spoke, you mentioned that on Ireland B, like I suppose, you know, the Christy Ring started the following year of 5, Nicky Rackard, those competitions came in. I think that the one thing that's been probably lost, Colm, in all of that, like I remember like the Rackard final, the first year, Louth were in it, McDown and Westmeath were in the Christy Ring final. That was on before the Clare Cork All-Ireland semi-final, you know, 5. I think there was 65,000 people there that day. The Nicky Rackard final the following week was on before the Galway Kilkenny game, right?
Huge, like,
you know, it was massive. Like, it was absolutely incredible. Like, you know, for those players, like the second half of those matches, like, you know, not a full house, but not far off. And I think that's the one thing I suppose that would disappoint me a little bit about you have the Nicky Rackard, you have the Christy Ring, the Laurie Maher, like kind of lost in a way, you know, and it's not anybody's fault, but you know, like any of this, what they're on at 1, 3, 5, and even I was looking at this during the week, like, you know, you have some brilliant stories, like you CJ McGurty, who's playing for Tyrone, former Antrim footballer, Antrim dual player, won an All-Ireland with St. Gall's. You have a guy from Longford, Joe O'Brien, I think he's 36, 37, phenomenal servant, got 12 points, the 13 points he got last week against Cavan. You know, you've obviously the Kildare lads, the Mayo lads, you know, you've right, like Pádraig Kelly's brilliant player for Roscommon. Like, you know, like, really good players. And, you know, like the Loud fellas, like there's a guy, Darren Gagan. If you read this recently, where he's Loud's free taker, and he's in college in Waterford. Like, I'm not sure if he's still there, but he went to he was playing freshers down in Waterford, and he was in the first meeting, and he was in a room with Kilkenny lads, Tip lads, Cork lads, Waterford lads, and he said, "Well, I'm from Loud," like, and I think they were kind of looking at him, but then he went out, and I think that for the first couple of months he was on that team, you know, and then maybe when the team got strong, he was the captain of the freshers B, like, you know, excellent player. Like, I was actually at the final in 2020. He was on before the Galway, I think it was before the Waterford Kilkenny semi-final, and I watched the game from behind the goals. I was working that day, and I just went down behind the goals and watched it, and it was really good standard. Like, I thought, you know, Louth and Fermanagh, and I think he got 10 points that day. He's playing again on Sunday or Saturday.
There's so many stories of guys.
So many stories, Colm, exactly, that are just, and this is the problem. We've mentioned this so often, you know, where, you know, let's be honest about it. All the attention is on the Wexford Kilkenny game, you know, the Galway Dublin game. That's where I'm going to be on Saturday. I'm going to be in Pearse Stadium, please God. And it's the same with the Tailteann Cup. You know, they're talking about promoting the Tailteann Cup. You know, this is the conundrum. Like, it's, how do you do this if you have the season designed out the way the GAA have it? Like, you know, you see the Sunday game every Sunday night. You know, what's the show last week of the Wexford or the Westmeath Wexford game?
I couldn't even tell. I couldn't even tell which team was which either. With the jerseys and the camera
angle was like, and look, that's nobody's fault. It's just the manpower and the you know, the trying to get cameras everywhere. But this is the pity, really, because, like, I've always been a huge fan of if there was ever a game, for example, a Christy Ring game, or, you know, was on before another game, and you're at it, absolutely go to see it. And we've mentioned this, like the Joe McDonagh, obviously massive, unbelievable competition again this year. Incredible.
That off the Kerry game at the weekend, like. Yeah,
absolutely. But, like, the sad thing about it, Colm, like in 2018 and 2019, like the Joe McDonagh final was on. You had the Leinster final on at 4, you had the Munster final on at 2, and you have the Joe McDonagh final on at 2. So, like, it's no disrespect to that competition, but if you're in Croke Park, for example, and
watch the
Munster final is on at the same time, it's just, you know, people are going to watch the Munster final on a TV, even though there's an epic game probably going on outside on in front of them. But that's just, I've had major issues with that stuff in terms of trying to promote hurling, like that. It's not, and I don't think it's fair on the players.
Like, you know, did you go maybe it's the Saturday and the Sunday for the Munster and the Leinster Hurling final, and then have the Christy Ring maybe in the Munster final beforehand, no matter who's in it and whoever. Absolutely. Because the crowds are coming from those counties to be small anyway. It's not going to be needing 10,000 tickets each, like.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, Colm, you will have people from these counties that will go to the Munster final, even if their counties aren't in it. You know, and like, I think there's a situation now whereby, you know, the minors aren't played. The Leinster minor final was on Monday night. The Munster minor final was on last week. The round robin is kicking off this week. So it's not as if, like, the minor finals were on before it. So, like, tradition has gone out the window. So why couldn't they play the Christy Ring final? You know, why couldn't they slate it in such a way where it's a curtain raiser to one of those games? Even maybe a curtain raiser to, I don't know, to the Wexford Kilkenny game on Sunday or Saturday.
Yeah, huge potential. Cian, I said I was going to say that I see the Galway Miners are getting a home game for the first time. Is it in the championship?
Yeah, the Galway Miners are at home to Clare on Saturday in Kenny Park in Athenry. I suppose there's two ways of looking at it. It's great that the Galway Camogie team are going to play ahead of the Galway Dublin game in the Leinster Championship too. So there's no shortage of matches on Saturday. Maybe the triple header might have satisfied some, because it's going to be hard to be everywhere. But yeah, no, it's awful hard though for the Galway Minor. I suppose the eternal debate, but Clare coming in after an action-packed campaign in Munster, involved in a thriller against Tipperary, and Galway simply could be brilliant, but they don't know where they're at. And it's hard because I think that if you play 4 or 5 matches in a championship Christy, it's inevitable that by the 4th or 5th game, there's going to be a lot of changes to what you started off with.
Yeah, 100%, Cian. I think like there's no question it is. Like Clare have a big advantage. They played 5 games, you know, lost twice. You know, they could make that argument. Galway have, you know, Galway don't get the same opportunity. But like I think it is bubbling up to be a really, really interesting, you know, minor championship. You know, you've Offaly come through from the other night. You know, Laois looks strong in that. It's like, you know, you're round robin now with Galway, Clare, Laois. You've Tip waiting in the semi-final, you've Offaly waiting in the semi-final. Yeah, like a lot of good players, like, you know, like, and I suppose that this is the problem, I think, sometimes with the minors is like, you know, if you get to, like, you know, if you get to a provincial final, you know, you're guaranteed to go into a round robin. You have 2 more games, possibly 4, right? You get to win a semi-final, get to a final. You look at Cork then, for example, this year, you know, where they beat Limerick in their first game, they beat Kerry, okay, and then they go straight into a semi-final and they lose to Cork and they're gone. So, okay, they've had 3 games, but there's no kind of backdoor for them. And look at, I was thrilled that Clare went down. Now, obviously Cork were top in their group, they had home advantage. Clare to go down to Porky and beat them down there, which is brilliant. But like, you know, Galway could make that same point where they don't have the same leeway that the other teams have. But look at it's looking forward to that game now as well. And I suppose there's been a lot of talk about in Galway, about Aaron Ireland, brilliant young player from Clarenbridge, Evan's brother, still underage next year, being touted as the next big thing, Galway. So I think, you know, and he's an incredible player, you know, unbelievably talented. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see now how the Clare boys will handle him on Saturday, you know.
Oh, it's great to have the matches back, and thanks for your insight as ever, Christy. Brilliant to talk hurling.
Pleasure, lads. Thank you so much. Cheers.